On the third anniversary of the January 6th insurrection, President Biden's campaign dropped a hard-hitting new video. Terrifying new footage was released of MAGA's violent attempt to overthrow the government and install Donald Trump as a dictator, and parts of the mainstream media dropped the ball in the worst possible way. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure before you go to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons. It's greatly appreciated. All right, friends, I've got several clips to play. We're going to start with this one here. It's a sobering new campaign advertisement from President Biden's campaign on the third anniversary of January the 6th.
January 6th was a very interesting day because they don't report it properly. People in that crowd said it was the most beautiful day they've ever experienced. There was love in that crowd. There was love and unity.
My kids didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts.
I call them the J6 hostages. Not prisoners, I call them the hostages.
There'll be a lot of pardons and commutations of J6 defendants, January 6 defendants under your administration?
Yes, absolutely.
They were there with love in their heart. That was an unbelievable, and it was a beautiful day. It was a beautiful day.
Like President Biden said in his speech on January 5th, so just about a day ago, the contrast between these two men and their campaigns could not be clearer. The contrast between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party could not be clearer. President Biden is far from perfect. The Democratic Party is far from perfect. But the Republican Party has become an authoritarian cult of personality. And that's what happened 3 years ago. 3 years ago, a deranged authoritarian right-wing cult attempted to violently overthrow the government in order to install Donald Trump as a dictator after, and this is important, he availed himself of and exhausted himself of every legal option. It's bad enough that this man tried to sue his way into the White House. Can you imagine if Hillary Clinton tried to do that in 2016 or anybody else for that matter? But he had those legal options and he availed himself of them, and he lost more than 60 court cases. He lost every recount and audit known to man. And even those after the election, he continued to lose and lose and lose. And so when all other options were exhausted, which included, trying to pressure his then vice president, Mike Pence, into simply just unilaterally overthrowing the election and making Trump president. Again, imagine if Vice President Al Gore, a Democrat, did that in 2000, imagine if Vice President Joe Biden did that in 2016 in favor of Hillary Clinton, or if Vice President Kamala Harris tries to do it in 2024. Imagine how Republicans and conservatives would feel in this country. They would be rightly furious, right? Because it's wrong. The Constitution did not empower one person to make a single decision as vice president to change the course of a democratic election. But Republicans, specifically MAGA Republicans, specifically Donald Trump and his inner circle, felt that that was their entitlement. It's disgusting. So when all that failed, that's when you had the actual insurrection, at least in terms of the riot. Okay, it's absolutely despicable. The Republican cult has tried to spin this and say, well, it was mostly a day of unity. It was a beautiful day, love and unity. But what we have here is a woman named Pam Hempill, okay? And this is part of a larger interview with CNN. She was there during January the 6th, and she was convicted. She has become an outspoken critic of her former cult leader, Donald Trump, and the cult itself, MAGA, and she clears it up.
What's your reaction to what you just heard there from President Trump? Is Biden fear-mongering about the fate of democracy here?
Absolutely not. That's the MAGA, I don't know how to explain it, but they have this way of demeaning you and putting you down. And that's what they've got going right now, is this huge gaslighting smear campaign going on, telling me that it was a peaceful protest. I was there. I was there when they pushed those gates and those officers, and when they stepped on my head.
She was there. She was there trying to overthrow the government on behalf of Donald Trump. And even she says it was not peaceful. It was not a demonstration of love. It was a cultish authoritarian demonstration where there is no equivalent of that on the left or with the Democratic Party. Other things I want to remind people of. So this is a captured moment. This was the moment when Trump supporters took down the U.S. flag and threw it on the ground so they could replace it with the Trump flag. And this was at the United States Capitol. As Mehdi Hassan, my favorite progressive commentator in the mainstream media, says, "Make America great again." Makes you wonder, again, imagine a left-wing mob assaulting the Capitol and taking down the United States flag to put up, I don't know, what flag do right-wingers despise above all others? Probably the pride flag. Imagine the reaction they would get or would ensue if that were to ever happen. But of course it wouldn't, because for all of the left's faults, and we are not perfect, the left and the Democratic Party are, generally speaking, morally and intellectually superior to what the Republican Party has become, particularly when it comes to Republican elected officials. We have additional footage, again, as a reminder of this peaceful and united, demonstration of love and loyalty to the Constitution. That sure looks like a Trump supporter trying to, or actually succeeding in assaulting a United States police officer. I thought Republicans were the party of law and order and the party of being pro-police. Apparently not when it comes to their cult leader, Donald Trump. Then again, all principle goes out the window. Ryan J. Riley, a reporter, pointed out that dramatic new January 6th video shows 2 Republican representatives speaking with Capitol rioters through the broken windows of the House chamber as officers point weapons at the mob attempting to breach the door. We're not going to play the whole thing, but this is a thread of new footage.
These are all your patriots. This is our house. This is our house. Our house.
How do you handle this thing?
Open the door, brother.
How do you handle it?
Come on, man, open the door.
They're socialist pigs. You're gonna kill patriots and put this war together.
Handle it.
What's wrong with you? Are you
Fucking handle it.
You got kids. You got kids. We got kids. We're fighting.
And I'm ashamed of my Congress people. They don't even stand up for it.
They're giving away
You're giving away my grandchildren and your grandchildren's freedom.
What? Fucking this up.
This is about starting a civil war. If this doesn't.
Let's see, there's more there too. I've been in law enforcement in Texas for 30 years, and I've never had people act this way. Representative Troy Nehls told member of the pro-Trump mob on January 6th, "I'm ashamed." That's from the footage. That's Troy Nehls right there. The guy who says, and that's, by the way, Mark Wayne Mullen, a Republican senator behind him. These are 2 Trump supporters who have since again abandoned their principle. They've apparently forgotten what's gone on that day. They can only kill so many of us effing pedophiles. We know about your pedophilia. If we're going to hang a bunch of crooked congressmen, we'll do that, okay? This is people saying this, Trump cultists saying this to elected representatives in the United States government. Absolutely despicable. The Biden-Harris campaign also released a thread going through on Twitter the details of the lead up to the January 6th insurrection. 3 years ago today, a violent mob of MAGA extremists riled up by Donald Trump took part in an insurrection against the American democracy. This thread will chronicle as it unfolded. 12:43 a.m., 3 years ago at this moment, Trump commands Republicans to fight as Congress prepares to certify the 2020 election. 8:06, Secret Service sends out an internal alert that people in the crowd at Trump's rally are wearing ballistic helmets, body armor, and carrying radio equipment and military-grade backpacks. Again, they have the citations here. Trump tells Mike Pence he has the power to steal the election from the American people. 12:11 p.m., Trump riles up his supporters outside the White House, telling them the country can't take it any longer. As the crowd cheers, he says, "We will stop the steal." He tells the crowd he'll march to the Capitol with them. A MAGA mob breaks through the barriers at 1 p.m., overruns Capitol Police, and storms the seat of American democracy. Trump was notified that the Capitol was under attack at 1:21 p.m., so 20 minutes later. He remained in the Oval Office dining room for 187 minutes as he watched on live TV. This, again, is something that I've had to talk about quite a bit over the past several days in conversations and debates with Destiny and others. Donald Trump, and this is very important, as the sitting president of the United States, had the greatest moral and constitutional obligation to stop that insurrection, really to prevent it in the first place, but then once it happened, to stop it immediately. Not Nancy Pelosi, not D.C. Mayor Bowser, not any Democrat or other Republican. Donald Trump was the most powerful man on earth, the head of state and the head of government, the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, the commander-in-chief of the D.C. National Guard. Republicans now, cowardly Republicans and MAGA cultists, try to absolve him of responsibility. It was Nancy Pelosi's fault. No, it wasn't. Donald Trump had infinitely greater authority and infinitely greater responsibility, not Nancy Pelosi, to stop that insurrection. He failed. So in that moment, for those 187 minutes, if nothing else, Donald Trump morally disqualified himself from the presidency. I'm trying to imagine again if the shoe was on the other foot and it had been a Democrat who had done that. If it had been Barack Obama and Vice President Biden doing this in 2016 when Donald Trump won the election, how would Republicans, conservatives, and MAGA cultists react? They would be rightly disgusted. Principle dictates they be disgusted here, but because they're unprincipled, they're cowards and losers, they won't be. They don't care about principle. It's all about power in the end. Now, I want to remind everybody that the media understood what happened at the time. The New York Times, Trump incites mob, pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, pro-Trump mob invades the Capitol, insurrection. The media understood at the time. It was a rare moment of unity. The Washington Post, the Star Tribune, Arizona Republic, the News Tribune, the Hartford Courier, the LA Times, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Kansas City Star, most major publications talked about the chaos and how it was under siege and how it was an insurrection, an assault on democracy, all the things. They understood. They had a clear conception at the time. And yet 3 years later, there seems to be suggestions that they've forgotten too, that much like Republican elected officials and MAGA cultists, that the mainstream media is starting to get a sense of amnesia, where there are two equally valid, legitimate interpretations of the January 6th insurrection. So the Associated Press says one attack, two interpretations. Biden and Trump both make January 6th riot a political rallying cry, which is the most ridiculous, sanitized headline. As Brian Tyler Cohen points out, this type of headline is exactly what's wrong with both sides' journalism. And you know how I complain about that all the time. This idea that journalists, in order to be perceived as objective, are actually dishonest because they create an artificial, a false equivalence between two different things in order to avoid the appearance of bias. That's not how the real world works. There are very often situations where you have two very different sides. Again, if I'm a journalist or somebody in news and I'm, let's say, moderating a debate or interviewing a flat earther and a round earther, it would be journalistic malpractice to suggest that the flat earther has as equally valid an opinion as the round earther. The earth is round. Flat earthers are just objectively wrong. And so too is the situation with January 6th. It was an insurrection. Anyone who says otherwise is wrong. It was an attack on democracy. Anyone who says otherwise is wrong. Donald Trump was intimately involved with setting the stage for it and was derelict in his duty. And anyone who says otherwise is wrong. Joe Biden is right on January 6th. That's just a matter of fact. And for journalists to pretend otherwise for the sake of both sidesism, it's really pathetic and they should be called out. As a matter of fact, there's a great op-ed in The Guardian written by Margaret Sullivan. This was written actually before President Biden's speech yesterday on January 5th. She says, Biden's January 6th speech is bigger than the horse race. Can the media say that? We're not going to read the whole thing, but it's pretty good. When Joe Biden talks on Friday about U.S. democracy on the brink, there's no doubt that it will be a campaign speech, maybe the most important one of his life. But the speech will be more than that. It's intended as a warning and red alert delivered on the anniversary of the violent January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. Can the political media in America get that reality across, or will their addiction to horse race coverage prevail? So far, the signs are not particularly promising. And she gives a bunch of examples of where people, both sides, or sanitize this situation. Okay. And she has a couple of things I want to read here too. The mainstream media is not nearly as comfortable with communicating the larger concepts, even when the stakes are this high. Constantly under attack from the right, they fear looking like they're in the tank for a particular candidate or party. So they fall back on those traditional building blocks of coverage: numbers, polls, approval ratings. That may have worked in the past, or at least been relatively unobjectionable. Not anymore. Speech coverage is only one part of that. Journalists need to get across to voters in day-to-day coverage between now and November what a second Trump presidency would mean. And then here at the bottom, I love this one right here. As Barron concluded, no editorializing is necessary because all of those threats by nature, by definition, are authoritarian. That is the message that needs to come across this weekend and in the months ahead. Reporters and their bosses, both in newsrooms and in glossy corporate offices, should remember that being in favor of democracy isn't a journalistic crime. In fact, it's a journalistic obligation. I think she's absolutely correct. So again, we're at the third year of the January 6th insurrection, if nothing else, and there's plenty of other things, but if nothing else, as far as I'm concerned, I think as far as any America-loving patriot is concerned, January 6th has disqualified Donald Trump and his brand of the Republican Party from office. They are morally disqualified from office. They are morally inferior to every elected Democrat. I'll say it again. Any elected Republican who excuses or supports January 6th, who doesn't ruthlessly, vociferously condemn it, and Donald Trump, not just says, well, it's bad. No. They would need to be like Liz Cheney, like Adam Kinzinger, with whom I have enormous policy difference, but be unequivocal and ferocious in their criticism of January 6th. It was an insurrection. It was indefensible. Donald Trump is morally culpable for it. He should be legally culpable for it. Unless a Republican says that, unless an elected Republican official says that, they are by definition morally inferior to any elected Democrat. I just don't want to mince terms about it. We're not dealing with two morally equivalent parties. The Democratic Party is better, and January 6th is demonstrative of that fact. And there are plenty of other reasons to come to that conclusion as well. But the Republican Party, if you go on social media right now, they are not condemning January 6th, with very few exceptions. Again, Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, people who are no longer in Congress, maybe Mitt Romney. Other than that, they're ignoring it or making excuses for it, pretending it was a deep state plant, that it was Antifa or it was actually Nancy Pelosi or it was the FBI. That's disgusting. And you should punish them for it relentlessly at the ballot box this November and every November which follows. Let me know what you think in the comments.